So first let's start with the goals. The floor judge is the one arriving at the table. So what he will need to do is identify what is happening. Is it just a simple situation, or is it something that requires to investigate? Is it just a rules question? Is this a he said, she said situation where both players disagree? This is what the floor judge will need to assess. Once the floor judge basically has identified these elements, I will detail them a bit later, the hand goes to the head judge, who will go through a deeper investigation and make a decision, because at some point he's going to need to make a decision. He's not we do. He has to, and he cannot spend 40 minutes on it, or he should not. The two roles are very different, but neither is more important. The two roles are complement each other. The two roles complement each other. Like I wrote here, without a proper pre-investigation led by the floor judge, the head judge either will not know there is something to investigate, or will have a much harder time. So that's what I said. The concept of a pre-investigation. I think this is what floor judges do. Head judges investigate, floor judges pre-investigate. So let's go with the floor judge's role. Hey, I feel like a paper team. I already lost the tape. Someone stole my tape. But so goals of the floor judge. So like I said, identify the situation. Now, if it's lost, it's my fault. So identify the situation. Understand, not exactly, but understand the, have a global picture of what's happening. Players disagreeing, trying to understand what they disagree on. Basically understanding what is the problem between players. Why do I say that? It often happens that I arrive at the table as a head judge, and I'm like, so, from what I've been told, problem is that. And players are like, no. Okay, so let's go from scratch. Let's start again. What's happening? And indeed, at some point, there has been miscommunication between players and the floor judge. And at that point, the whole process needs to be done again. So it's very important to focus on identifying the problem. Gathering facts, or the first story of the players, the first version, the first side of the story of the players. That's important because afterwards, this story can be confronted with any possible updated version, which is very important in determining if someone is trying to hide something or not. This first story is very important because players are very likely to say something that is extremely close to what happens. No one can create a wonderful story from scratch in 30 seconds. it can't happen. But after a couple minutes, we'll see that afterwards, what players tell you can be right, can be wrong. It's fairly easy after some preparation to make a story that is likely. So once the situation is identified, the situation is understood, and facts and stories have been collected, I think it's time to either make a decision if it's possible, because there may not be anything to investigate further, or to get a head judge. If you feel that's a situation that requires a head judge attention. So, goals by the head judge. First one, talking to the floor judge to gather the elements the floor judge understood. Afterwards, listening to both players. Both is important. I'll come back on that later. A question that's important to ask yourself as a head judge: is it worth investigating? That's a really interesting part. That's a paradox. Sometimes it's not worth investigating even if you know something is going wrong. I'll have a couple examples about that. 4. How to identify possible lying. 5. The concept of having evidence, having proofs, versus the concept of being certain enough something happened. 6. Making a timely decision. And finally, something more technical and not related to the tournament, reporting a DQ in the judge center. So getting the initial picture. It's important when you're the head judge. It's important to have understood as much as you can before reaching the table. Reason is you obviously don't want to discuss the details in front of the players, and you want to have an as complete picture as possible. So what I suggest, or what I do at least, but what I suggest as well, whenever a floor judge comes to me and he's like, I've got an appeal or possible investigation, it's over there, and he leaves. I stop him like, okay, so we're not going to walk. We're going to stay here for 1 minute, and you're going to explain to me what's happening. Why? Between two tables, if there's 1 meter, that's wonderful, which means that the two of you can't walk next to each other. And if you're ahead of someone and you're trying to speak, your voice projects in that direction, but not behind. So, especially if you're walking fast, it's very likely that the floor judge is leading. So the head judge is behind, and it's likely it's gonna be, sorry, what did you say? So overall, you're losing time. Additionally, it puts kind of a deadline, like I have to explain everything before we reach the table, which doesn't really make sense, because even if we are looking to make a timely decision, we are looking to make a good decision. And it's not really possible to make a good decision without all the elements. Worse, if you're missing some elements, it can be it could be counterproductive, because you will be confused at the table and you're going to lose even more time. So that's the first step, understanding what's happening. And I really suggest to do it in front of the stage, because it's just easier. Mandatory elements together. What happens? The facts. What is the situation? What does the board look like if it's relevant? We're not talking yet about the stories. It's like, okay, so he's got 4 creatures, he's at 2 life, something like that. Afterwards, do players agree? Do they disagree on something? What do they disagree on? Like I said, it's very important to know what players have an issue with, to be able to make a more swift investigation. If they disagree, what do players say? So player A claims this, but player B claims that. That's something important. I'll talk about it a bit later, but sometimes players can disagree and still say the truth. It's just that in their perception, someone did something and the other did not. A good example of this is looking at my opponent passing priority. I think that's the best example. So I looked at him for 3-4 seconds or something like this. He assumes I passed. I don't think I passed, which can be highly relevant with mistriggers, for instance. And something that I think is important, asking the floor judge, so what do you think? What was your initial feeling? I think it's very important because the floor judge was the very first one at the table. So he saw natural reactions by players. So now we've walked to the table and we have started to talk to players. In the case they pretty much agree on what's been happening, I like to summarize the situation. In the example I gave earlier, to just make sure I understood the situation. That's usually at that time they're like, no. But that's something else. At least at the very first moment I reached there, if I understood the situation correctly, they understand that I'm aware of what's happening, so they feel more confident in anything I could be saying. And if I did not understand properly, at least I know immediately. I'm not making a ruling, and they're like, really? What's your ruling about? Because this is not the issue. And now the fun begins. Players disagree. At that moment, it's very important, and that's a major rule. Listen to both of them. Some things that happened to me, it was back in 2011 at Grand Prix Pittsburgh. I'm called at a table because of life total discrepancy.
20 minutes of hour.
Maybe a bit more. So it's the last table of day one, of the last round of day one, which was good because along with the cut at 7-2, at least everybody else was out, and they didn't have to wait. But so they disagree on life totals, and obviously they notice when one player is about to go to either 0 or 2. Otherwise, there's no fun. And one player speaks much more than the other. So he's talking. Well, he's giving pretty much his side of the story. At some point, he says lots of things. I try to talk a little to the other who's not extremely responsive, but I don't think I made a real effort to have him express his side of the story. And I rule in favor of the player who was talking the most. I am still convinced that I made the right decision here, based on several facts. But here's what happened. The other guy, when I made the final ruling, the other guy was like, so now, can I also speak for 20 minutes to eat your brain? And I had an argument. I had a point ready, and I told him, well, you know, on that turn, when I don't think, based on the couple sentences you said, that he forgot to attack because there's no point. And when I asked you, so what did he do else? You said, I don't care, it's not my problem. I don't care what he did, it's not my problem. So, and I don't buy this. So most likely he attacked and you both genuinely forgot to track life. He ended up accepting the ruling, but he came back to me on day 2 twice, and his friends twice as well, to tell me that I really did a poor ruling. And, well, I think the ruling was right, but because I did not take measures to properly listen to one and the other, one of the players felt unfairly treated. Next point, speak to players apart. Why? If I were in an investigation and the judge wants to talk to us at the table, I want to play last. Really, I want to know what he says, because 2 options: I can adjust my story based on his, or, and that's somehow even worse. It's I could just say I agree with everything he said, except this, because. And especially with the second, I am giving almost no information. I just point out where I disagree. And by not giving any information as a player, I prevent the head judge to gather information to use to make a ruling. So that's why it's important to take them apart from the table, or if you feel you need the board, you ask one player to leave with a floor judge, while the other player will show you some things using the game state. Have the floor judge stay with you to... Yes? Sorry?
Excuse me. Are we talking about an appeal to the head judge, or when the floor judge is talking to both players right now?
We're talking to the head judge, about the head judge. If you would like to do it as a floor judge, you can.
The thing is, the point is that when you are just giving the first impression of both players, just taking them apart takes too long. It's just, it's needed a further investigation.
I would say that as soon as you feel something could be going on, you can take players apart to try to gather as organic as possible stories, as close to reality as possible. I don't think it's mandatory to do for a floor judge, because the main protection the floor judge has is time. Because so little time has elapsed, it's unlikely players will be able to build a story in 20-30 seconds. But if at some point you feel something could be going on, you can take them separately, especially if you have a hard time with one player intervening at any time. Actually, if one player always interrupts the discussion you have with the other player, it's much better to say, okay, stop. Instead of trying to say, stop, remain quiet, etc., say, okay, come with me and we're going to talk 3-4 meters away. This is also time saving. So it's taking them apart is not necessarily time consuming, because because you could lose even more time trying to have one of them be quiet, remain silent. So yeah, from now on we will almost only be talking about head judge procedures, but plenty of them could be applied with the floor judge, keeping timing in mind. So yes, having the floor judge stay with you when you're taking one player apart. Have the floor judge come with you. He listened to the first story, so it's important he listens to the second one, just in case. That could make things like really quicker. So, that question, is it worth investigating? Of course, those two players, they want to know who's right and who's wrong. However, for the other 1,600, what's very important to them is if this is going to finish before 3 a.m. So I'm not saying it's we have to pay we have to favor time over anything. I am saying this is a balance. at some point, what you need to consider is, what are my chances to know what happened exactly? Because if I cannot know exactly what happened, I won't be able to make a great ruling. I will have to make a decision, but it's going to be between a bad ruling and a less bad ruling. A good ruling only happens when you know what's been happening. Afterwards, it's a ruling that will dissatisfy one player. So even if it's the best possible one, it's still usually bad. That's usually the case in the I said, he said situation, the one I was referring to. Oh, he looked at me instead for 10 seconds. I was still evaluating my options, etc. Yes, but I played. Now you know that I have this card, etc. Sure. Any witness? No. So I need to make a decision based on whatever. And that's at that point, it could be tempting to try to ask lots of questions just in case something would happen. But are you really going to spend 25 minutes to make, after these 25 minutes, the exact same bad ruling as you could have done after 5 minutes? So, bad ruling, 25 minutes, 5 minutes. So that's why you need to evaluate if it's going to lead anywhere. If it's unlikely, you might want to ask a couple of questions just in case. If it's not leading anywhere, say, okay, so I'm gonna make a decision. Another point is, like I said, after 10 minutes, if a player wanted to adjust his story, he had plenty of time to do. A story a player will tell you after 10 minutes is either right or right enough, because you won't be able to tell if it's false or not.
So use the word interesting there. What does it mean, interesting?
Interesting from the judge point of view. Can I find interesting elements in what the player says? Useful elements. If they keep on saying the exact same story, nothing's going to happen. So that's so once you've understood the situation, you need to try to create a plan. What are you going to do in your investigation? Because if you can't come up with anything solid, with anything you feel could lead anywhere, it's most likely time to just make a decision, and that's and that's about it. One example I have is GP Boston last year. It's a last table. So GP Boston was 1,900 players, while we expected 1,300. We were not exactly delayed, but that was a complex day. Last table, and those two players disagree whether a player was finished declaring his attackers or not. Okay, so basically one player says, he stopped and looked at me, and the other is like, I was still counting. Cool. So I asked a couple of questions like, okay, so you're telling me you're dead next turn, so why didn't you why didn't you swing with everything? It's like, because I still have 2 cards in hand, so keeping my Krenko back allowed me tons of blockers, and if he swings with everything and I've got 1 removal, maybe blah blah blah. So I was still pondering whether I should declare that Krenko as an attacker. Because also he's got like 2 cards in hand, and if he's got a spot removal, blah blah blah. Sure. And the other guy is like, yeah, but well, at some point he just looked at me and nothing happened. And the other guy is like, no, I disagree. Any witness? No. What do you want me to do? Like, he say, we disagree. I made a decision. I said, I basically decided that he did not attack with his Krenko, and most likely, and he lost the game eventually. Maybe it was the right ruling, maybe not. And the only reason I told him was like, next time you will speak to your opponent, you will say hold on or anything, or I'm finished. But if you don't want to speak, sorry, you created confusion, so he's right. So this case is interesting because it also involved evaluating whether one of the players was lying to me. The guy with a Krenko thing, who was trying to attack with his Krenko, he had several minutes to figure out a story. But actually, what was interesting was that in this situation, I felt like both players were actually slightly adjusting the story to make it better. So this is where it's complicated. When 2 players disagree, one of them could lie, both could lie, or none. I already talked about the none situation. They just have a distorted view of what happened, and the situation in which they both may be lying, or at least they're making their story slightly better. One example I have is at Grand Prix last year. A player plays a Forbidden Alchemy, and he takes the top card of his library, and instead of putting it, his hand is on the table. He dropped his hand face down on the table, and instead of taking the first to his hand, he put it, according to him, not on top of his hand, so it never touched. And according to the opponent, it was up to the card was not identifiable anymore, which is quite a large discrepancy between the stories. In the end, basically they both knew there was a game loss at stake. The guy who was playing the alchemy was on a much better situation on the board. So the other one he still had the drawing strikeout game loss to still win that game. And the guy was on a much better situation. He only had that drawing strikeout game loss to lose that game. So obviously, I think what happened is that it's very likely the card touched, technically, very technically touched. There's no way it got shuffled, despite what the opponent and all of his friends said. What was interesting was that there was like 4 people on one side saying basically yes, he shuffled, and 4 on the other side saying it never touched. So that's what they, I think they entered into a process of, you know, so I say this, he say this, which is not exactly true but could get me in deep trouble, so I'm gonna slightly adjust my story. And from a story like this, we end up having this distorted view of the reality. Did they lie? Not really. A bit. Not that much. So, and it was what I just explained is something that I only thought about it a couple of weeks after. The ruling I did at that moment was to say, okay, what I think has happened is that this touched, period. So that's clear grounds for drawing strikeouts. You get a game loss, and that's about it. I think it was not the right decision at that point, but well, we all make mistakes. I think I should have disqualified the opponent because when he tried to imply, when he implied that the card got shuffled, it was clearly in an attempt to get the game loss. I think I think the player who said it did not touch was not. It was more like defending himself more than lying. If I were to do the same ruling again, I think I would disqualify the opponent for lying, and not the player who was playing the forbidden alchemy. Now, players saying different things at different times. It can be helping. It can also be misleading. It's helping in the first minutes of the investigation. If you keep asking the same questions again and again, and at some point he says something different, it's misleading. Because if you keep on asking the same question, at some point you send a message that is, I want another answer. So, and what are the player's options? If he wants to be helpful, he's going to try to tell you something else because he feels he has to. So, he's not telling the truth anymore, but I don't think that's really his fault. It's you as a judge have been insisting so much on it that he felt he has to. So that's why, in the same way that I think it's another good example of a story you're told after too long has no value. Sometimes it's because the player had time to create a nice story. Sometimes just because he feels he has to, because you keep on asking the same question. Cool.
Kevin,
Yes.
on the Boston ruling, how
Yes.
important for your decision was the fact that the active player controls the phase of the turn and was the one that was not communicating? Did that make you inclined to go against him?
It was a gut feeling ruling, honestly, which was, I think the attacking player was a bit confused. And they both agreed that it took him a long time to think about his attackers, and he was claiming he was still doing the math. And I don't think it takes you 3 minutes to be able to count up to 21. I hope so. Or it's complicated to play Magic, maybe. But basically, this is pretty much not what I could tell him. And but what was certain was that he did not communicate, and he should have taken measures to make it clear where he was.
That's true for the non-active player that has to wait for communication and passing priority, right? So if it happened the other way, the non-active player, by not communicating, have a good case on, hey, I'm waiting for him to communicate first, right?
Yes. Active player, except during end of turn, active player has control of his turn. Up to the point he says go. I like to say that a player's turn starts at the end of turn of his opponent and ends at the beginning of his end of turn, in terms of having control over the game. Okay, I'm gonna try to wrap this up. I'll be very available to discuss anything afterwards. The concept of having evidence, having proofs versus feelings. Basically, very few situations rely on proofs, except when you were at that table and they took that die and they rolled it. Or whenever one guy stands up and punches the other in the face, that's like a hard fact. But evidence or not, you need to make a decision. So when you make a decision, you don't need to be 100% sure. You need to be certain enough. That's an important point. And usually the mistake is that because you want to be 100% sure, you go on investigating and asking questions that don't lead anywhere. That's what I explained. And the more you're going to ask questions, the less certain you're going to be, because players will adjust. If one of them is lying, one of them will adjust his story. So between your initial feeling, the degree of certainty of your initial feeling, and the one after 15 minutes, it's likely to be lower. So that's why it's important to make a timely decision, not in a hurry, but still timely. Anyway, 90% of your investigations will end up with a ruling based on what you feel has happened. You'll never know for sure. More time with less certainty. I need to remove that from one of the two sheets. When do you need to make a decision? When you're asking the same question, a question for the second or third time, you need to realize you've entered a loop. Let's shortcut. Uh, what back to Grand Prix Lille, I gave a plus 40-minute time extension at the table because I just forgot to apply this rule. Fortunately, this table ended up with 2-0, which was a good news. Actually, when we announced 10 minutes left in the round, they were on turn 4 of game 1. And the decision was bad. So that's why at some point you need to ask yourself, you need to tell yourself, so now I'm going to make a decision. I have to. Yeah. Going into loops, it's even worse than just being useless. It's confusing. If you're unclear which of the players is lying, you do not decide randomly. You make a ruling based on miscommunication. Basically, you make a ruling based on what's the most probable. You don't really want to coin flip disqualification for cheating fraud. You don't really want to do that. If you conclude that one of the players should be disqualified, I strongly suggest you talk to him about why. Because especially if he's got friends around and you announce a disqualification, this is gonna heighten the pressure. And it's got the player will feel supported, and you are not going to announce something to one player, but to a group of players, which is way worse, because at that point they can try to intervene, and you have to you have to argue with them. They will argue your decision, and at some point it's counterproductive. I wrote indirect pressure. There could also be direct pressure. Yes?
Quickly, they could also prevent spectators to put pressure on the player, because the player will be more likely to defend himself, like I'm totally honest, it was a mistake, and so on, if he's surrounded by his friend and their possible judgment. And it's more likely that in front of you, he just say, yeah, you got me, I was.
Yeah, that's a good point. I will add it. That's a very good point. If your decision is based on a feeling because you don't really know, but you needed to make a decision, that's a perfect introduction for making your final rule. And it's like, okay, first, I want you to understand that I can't be certain what happened, but I have to make a decision. Based on this, and this, I think what happened is this. Once again, I can be sure, but we have to make this tournament. We have to keep this tournament running. Now that I'm doing this, I have had very few players arguing over and over. Because you make them understand, you make them aware. You do not pretend to be right, but that you're just doing your job. I think the last time I had an issue was more than 1 year ago. Even when it's a decisive decision for making day 2 or something like this. happened in Bochum, and the player was like, okay, sure, next time I do a bit better. And I think I'm already late, and I can skip the technical thing about the judge center, because it's not really about investigating, it's more about administrative. So yeah, that's about it for investigations. Once again, if you've got questions you would like to discuss, not now, but feel free to come to me over the weekend. Yeah, thank you.